You know, here at Anderson Seed and Garden, it's full-on bulb season, and one of the best things you can do with fall planted bulbs, you know, like tulips, daffodils, hyacinths, is plant them indoors and trick them into thinking that winter has come and gone to get them to bloom inside so that we can enjoy them. So it's called forcing, but we're really not forcing the bulbs to do anything different than what they would normally do. We're fooling them into thinking that winter has come and gone. And there's a couple things you gotta know and you gotta do correctly, or else your bulbs are not going to force very well. They're not going to bloom inside, and you're going to be disappointed with your efforts. And I talk to a lot of gardeners every year, and they've been disappointed in how their forced bulbs have turned out. And there's a few steps that we've got to make sure and cover, or else you're just not going to be successful. One is you got to pick the right kind of bulbs. Now, not every type of fall bulb will force well in a pot or a container, and so you've got to find the right kind of bulbs. When it comes to tulips, there's a couple of varieties that will do really well, and they're called Single Early and Triumph. Now, both these two colors are Triumph bulbs, and there's a lot of different types of tulips. So there's Darwin hybrids, there's Fosteriana, there's single lates. What you're looking for are Single Early or Triumph tulips, and a lot of times it will say on the box, suitable for forcing. Those are the ones you're looking for, because if you do some of the taller, later maturing bulbs, they just don't force very well. So you want the earliest tulips that you can get. So Single Early or Triumph tulips force really, really well. When it comes to daffodils, I stay away from the large daffodils, and I just do the miniature daffodils. As you can see right here on the box, it says suitable for indoor forcing. So these are the smaller daffodils. They come on much, much earlier, and they work great when you're forcing bulbs indoors for the daffodils. And pretty much most of the hyacinths will force great. So they force really, really well, and so will crocus. They'll do excellent. And so make sure you start with the right kind of bulbs to begin with. The second thing you want to use is an inexpensive plastic pot, because we're going to put these in different locations. We're going to move it around to colder temperatures and bring it in where it's warm, and we don't want to break Grandma's prize ceramic pot that she handed down to you before she passed on. And so put it in an inexpensive plastic pot, and it's got to have holes in the bottom. It's got to have drainage. So we want drainage holes down the bottom of the pots. Inexpensive pot. This is a 7.5-inch pot. It's perfect for forcing. And we take a piece of paper towel and we put that down the bottom. That's just to keep the soil from falling through, but it'll allow the water to drain out properly. So I just put that down on the bottom. And when I'm forcing, you want to make sure and use the best potting soil that you possibly can. We want a soil that's going to absorb and hold the right amount of moisture, but it's going to allow the excess water to drain out the bottom so the bulbs aren't standing in water. We love the Ultimate Potting Mix from Fertilome. This is the best quality potting soil that we've ever been able to use. It's got peat moss, it's got perlite, it's got humate in there, it's got a wetting agent, it has just about everything that you need. And as you can see, it's just a nice, clean, light, fluffy potting soil. No sticks, no twigs, no bark, no junk in there. It's just the best quality potting soil that we've been able to find. And I like to put a good layer in there, probably 4, maybe even 5 inches. And we want to fill that bottom of the pot up with our Ultimate Potting Mix. And I'll show you about how deep to put it, because when we're done putting our bulbs in there, we want the tips of the bulbs just to be barely below the surface of the soil. And so yeah, I love working with the Ultimate Potting Mix. It's just so easy to work with. It's light and about that much. So we're going to leave probably about 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches from the rim of the pot. And I kind of press it down just a little bit, but don't compress it too much. When we water, the soil is going to compress a lot more, and so I'll just kind of finger press it so it presses it down. We're going to do the tulips. I think we'll do 5 tulips. Let's do two yellows and 3 reds, and you can mix colors. You can do all the same one. I don't like to mix tulips and hyacinths and daffodils all in the same pot, because they sometimes take a little bit longer to come, and so they don't all bloom at the same time. So I'll stick with the tulips, and the tips or the pointy parts, that's going to go up, and then you've got a place where the roots are going to develop, and you can kind of see where the roots have been on the bulbs. And you want to place the bulbs down on the bottom of the pot where the soil is, but don't grind them down into the soil. Just set them gently, because they do have a root system that has started to develop, even though you can't really see much of it. But you know, there's roots on there, so we'll just place those lightly in the bottom of the pot, and just put them in there so that they're not quite touching each other. So as you can see, those bulbs are spaced evenly. You know, we might be able to sneak another one in the middle there, but just so that they're not touching each other is the key. So about 5 bulbs, 6 bulbs per pot will work out perfectly. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put more soil over the top of the bulbs. And I'll just use my hand this time to do it. But we want the tips of the bulbs to be just right underneath the surface of the soil once we get that soil put in there. So that as we water the soil and it starts to settle and it kind of compacts on its own, the tips of the bulbs will just barely be sticking up out of the soil. So if I press down, I can feel those tips are just like right there, just about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a 1/2 inch below the surface of the soil right now. And then I'll take it, put it in a saucer where it'll collect the water. Then we'll take some water and just water those bulbs so that the water will, you know, I do it gradually, a little bit at a time. Since the Ultimate Potting Mix has a wetting agent in there, it helps the water to absorb and to penetrate down into the soil a little bit more. But it still takes a little bit of time for it to saturate all the way through. So I'll water it, I'll let it sit for a little bit, I'll water a little bit more, I'll let it sit for a little bit longer, and then when I finally water it and the water just kind of starts to drain out the bottom, then I know it's saturated really well. It's critical that we water those bulbs to get them started. And then we got to put them in a location where they're going to stay about 38 to 45 degrees for about more like 12 to 14 weeks is what we would like them to be. Some of the hyacinths have been prepared for 4 to 6 weeks, and so you can do those for 8 weeks. But where it comes to the tulips and the daffodils, they're going to need 12 to 14 weeks in that cold storage to get them to develop a flower, bud, and a root system so that they'll start to bloom. One thing that we have found, and one thing that Rutgers University has done a lot of experimenting and trials with, is that you can take your bulbs, you can take your tulip bulbs, you can put them in a paper sack, and you can stick them in your refrigerator for 12 weeks, and it will prepare the bulbs, it'll get them ready so you can plant them, so they don't have to go through the cold storage period in the soil. So you can do it both ways, but it's faster if you prepare them in the soil, because they'll be ready to bloom a lot quicker. They don't have to develop a root system as fast. And so I like to do them in the pots. As you can see, some of the soils, some of the water is actually drained out the bottom already, but I'm going to put this in a saucer, water it some more, get that soil to saturate all the way through. I'll label it so I know what date I did it on. I'll put it in my cold storage location. That can be in the basement. If it's cold enough, it can be in your crawl space. We've done it right outside in the garden and covered them up with mulch and you know, dug a trench and put them in the mulch. And you can just do it in the refrigerator as well too. That works great. But once that soil settles down, put it in your cool location. Leave them for the 12 to 14 weeks. You can leave them longer if you want. So I'll do like 4 or 5 containers and just start bringing one out at a time and get those close to blooming, and then bring another one out. And so I can have flowers in bloom for about 10 days to 2 weeks, pretty much throughout the winter time. If you start in October, you can get those bulbs to start producing flowers in January, and then you can have flowers in January and February and March before things even start to happen outside. So it's a great way to enjoy the flowers indoors. We'll trick those bulbs into thinking that winter is come and gone, and then when it's time, we pull those out of the cold storage, put them in kind of a cooler location in your house where there's lots and lots of indirect light. So maybe 60, 65 degrees for the first week, so they can kind of acclimate to the warmer temperatures. Then move them into a warmer spot where it'll really get them to come along quicker, 70 degrees, lots of sun, nice and warm. And then once they start to bloom, move them back into a cooler location, maybe in the kitchen or in the bathroom, where they get lots and lots of light, reflected light, but where it's not too warm, and your flowers will last a lot longer for you that way. So very easy to do. The keys are make sure you use the right kind of bulbs, make sure you use a great potting soil like the Fertilum Ultimate Potting Mix. You can add a little bit of fertilizer if you want, like a slow release Garden Coat 6, also from Fertilum. You can use fertilizer right in the water with it, but the bulbs kind of have what they need already in the bulb. So use a good pot, good drainage, great soil. Make sure and keep them in that location for 12 to 14 weeks, and you should be much more successful with your forced bulbs this time around.